Welcome to Super Connected, with me, Tim Arnold, and my special guests. We invite you to join us in an intimate and honest exploration into the theme of connection. What it means to be connected to each other, what it means to be connected to ourselves, and what it means to connect in an ever-changing world. In this episode of Super Connected, I am joined by two very special guests. It makes me feel like I've gone back into ancient Greece to a dream temple with two high priestesses of dreams. First, Kate Alderton is a British actress and independent dream researcher with a background in producing theatre. She's trained with the Centre for Social Dreaming, the Process Work Institute, and the eco-spiritual community Damanhur in Italy. She's also my partner in Dream, who has also collaborated on my latest album, Constellations. Jennifer Dumpert is a San Francisco-based writer, lecturer, and consciousness hacker. She is the author of Liminal Dreaming, Exploring Consciousness at the Edges of Sleep, and the founder of the Oneironauticum, an international organization that explores the phenomenological experience of dreams as a means of experimenting with mind. She also teaches the practice of liminal dreaming. Jennifer and Kate, welcome to Super Connected. How's life in San Francisco, Jennifer?
Life in San Francisco is quite lovely. There's a pandemic and, of course, chaos all around me, although my daily routine is mostly unaffected.
And let's just get this clear. It's midnight where you are in San Francisco.
It is indeed midnight where I am here in San Francisco.
And Kate, you're in London with me, and what time is it here?
It's 7 o'clock in the morning in London.
It's 7 o'clock in the morning. So you've got your tea. Have you got a going to bed drink, Jennifer?
No, water.
Right.
That's water.
Well, just water.
No, that's it.
No, you haven't got a cauldron of mugwort boiling away there.
I haven't, though. You know, I would say probably a tenth of the time I am going to sleep with some Oneirogen by my side, but tonight is not one of those nights. I guess I ought to have made it so, but no.
Okay, so look, part of the reason this has all come together is to do with your book, Liminal Dreaming, and the connection between, and this show is all about connections, the connection between me, Kate, and you is that Kate bought me your book last year, which I read, and you know, really taught me a lot about myself and my dreaming life and sleeping that I had no idea, and hypnagogia and all these things which I realised I've lived with for a long time. Now, other people who are not familiar with your work, and indeed Kate's work, which we'll talk about as well in the show, may have no idea what I'm talking about, and every time I say the word dreams or dreaming, they may think I'm talking about something else. Do you want to explain a little bit about your book for listeners who are coming to this for the first time?
Sure. So I'm writing about liminal dreaming, which is the phrase for the spaces between waking and sleep, which are actually dream states, unlike REM dreams, which is the middle of the night dream. When people talk about dreams, they often mean REM dreams. But in fact, between the space that you are awake and you're asleep, as you're falling asleep, you go through hypnagogia. And in the space between sleep and waking, when you're waking up, you go through hypnopompia. And these are those hallucinatory, non-narrative, free associative dream states that in fact, everybody goes through. They're one of the 7 or 8 EEG states through which we all pass every 24 hours. So everybody knows this state and is a natural liminal dreamer. People don't often know what liminal dreaming is. So when I'm talking about liminal dreaming, I'm talking about those states, and they're both fascinating states to mine for consciousness experimentation and also wonderful for creativity, problem solving, healing, etc.
And how did you get into dreaming in such a deep and studied way? Is that something that you've done all your life, or was there a turning point that took you into that subject?
Well, the answer to both those questions is yes. I mean, I've always been a really vivid dreamer and have been interested in dream states, my whole life, partly because, a lot of my earliest memories are dreams, and a lot of my experience in a 24-hour period involves dreaming. What's happening to me in my dream world will stick with me as experience almost as much as what's happening with me in my daytime experience. And so I got into speaking about and writing about dream states and inventing practices that had to do with dreams, and getting involved with lucid dreaming and oneirogens and all sorts of topics that involve dreams, quite a long time ago. And then 5 or 6 years ago, I really started getting involved in this liminal dream space. So, dreams have always been really vivid for me. I did have like a watershed experience with a dream in the late 80s when I was living in Paris, where suddenly I became aware of how prominent the dream experience was for me in my day-to-day. But and as a sort of academic, I was already writing and speaking, so it just kind of made sense to shift into something that was so personally relevant for me.
Yeah. And Kate, you also have had a long, lifelong experience of dreaming. Is that right?
I have, yeah. It's interesting hearing you, Jennifer, talk about some of your earliest memories being a dream, because I think I feel very that rang very true for me. I would say that's very true for me too. I think my earliest memory was a dream, which is and I've never thought about it until you said that. So thank you for poking at that. But dreams have always been a huge part of my life and the way I live it. I think the way I think I've been threading dreams into my waking reality for a really long time.
And actually, and active with other people. So it's a social thing.
Yeah, for me, certainly in the last 6 or 7 years, I've been practicing social dreaming. Well, there are different ways of describing what social dreaming might be, but certainly I've been meeting with groups of dreamers, sharing dreams and acting on dreams in a very specific way in the waking world. So following the threads of dreams that some of us have, mining them for treasure, and then acting on them in an artistic way. So we've been going on journeys because of the things we've seen in dreams, and finding where the land might be that one of us has dreamed of, and going on these crazy trips.
So you make dreaming sound very exciting. It's like an adventure. There's journeys and treasure. Jennifer, does that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. So I had, and still do, but for about a dozen years, I had a very, very frequent dream group that met together, the Oneironauticum, people all around the world. And on the same night, we would all use the same oneirogen, some sort of like herb or root or scent or sound or whatever to help promote dreams. And a couple thousand people around the globe would be practicing the same oneirogen, using the same oneirogen, and practicing just dreaming together. Because dreaming is one of the most common things that we share as humans, like eating and laughing and crying and dying. Everybody who has ever lived has dreamed. So it's this very weird, incredibly personal, specific thing, and yet a thing that we all share. So I've definitely had a lot of like dream groups, social dreaming, which is an amazing movement in terms of, getting people together from disparate points of view and cultural circumstances. So for me, dreaming has often been like the great leveler, and yet this crazy leveler, like dreams are so freaking weird, and yet we all have them in common. Whoa, humans are strange.
You just brought up social dreaming, and it's something I've done a couple of times, and Kate and I have done that together. Kate, do you want to talk about social dreaming, your experience?
Well, I
guess a little bit, and then Jennifer, maybe I'd be interested for you both to compare.
I guess at the moment I'm following two strands of social dreaming. One of them is like you described, Jennifer. I'm although it's on a much smaller scale, 1,000 dreamers. Wow. I mean, that's just so exciting to hear.
Wild, isn't it?
Totally wild. I'm in a dreaming group called the Dreamfishing Society. So we are probably about 23 dreamers at any one time, dreaming for very specific artistic projects. So we kind of, we're sharing dreams in order to find where our collective meaning is and feeding them back into waking world artistic projects through the overlaps of the dreams and the things that are coming up for us. And then there's Tim and I trained at the Centre for Social Dreaming, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And that's a more structured way of social dreaming. Where
are you familiar with the Centre for Social Dreaming?
I am very, yeah.
So I've really enjoyed investigating and starting to practice and host social dreaming matrices because it's where dreams get to speak to dreams rather than the dreamers getting to speak to the dreamers. And there's something very particular that happens when dreams speak to each other, when you focus on the dream rather than the dreamer, and the dreams get to play with each other. And I find it a really beautiful way of connecting the alternative map to waking reality, which is our dream life that we all share. Yeah.
And
exactly. I mean, the idea of community built through dreaming, which we all do, and instead of whatever differences people have politically or culturally or whatever, to dream together and find this commonality can be pretty intense.
To me, it's so exciting, and I think I read about what you do, Jennifer, in the States. It's kind of like a sleepover. Is that right?
So what the Oneironauticum is, and I really only get to doing 1 or 2 a year now. For a long time I did them monthly, and the way that it worked was there's a group of us who sleep together in the same space to kind of like hold down the fort, and that's anywhere between 6 and 30 people who are usually in the same space. But then people around the world, we would post whatever oneirogen we were working with. And an oneirogen is anything that promotes vivid dreaming. So oneiro is the Greek for dream, and gen is to create, like generate. And so an oneirogen is anything that creates vivid dreaming. And a lot of indigenous cultures work with roots and herbs or sound. Lovely for you musicians, or scent are wonderful oneirogens, because when you're sleeping, the only senses that don't go to sleep are your sense of smell or your sense of hearing or particular foods or practices or whatever, so we would post whatever oneirogen it was that was going to be the focus of the Oneironauticum. And Tim, good on you for pronouncing that, because that's a flummoxing word for a lot of people. And so the people who found the practice from around the globe would get the mailings or go to the site and find out what oneirogen it was for the night, and then everybody who was participating, either the ones in person holding down the fort or the ones remotely. And we had people really all over the world. We had them in Australia and South America and Europe and the United States and Canada, really all over. And everyone would all use the same oneirogen. So using something to focus the intention of the dreaming, and then we would all dream together over that night.
Sorry, go on, Kate.
I'm fascinated by how you then start to share the collective dreaming when the dreaming is through, because that's certainly something that's with large scale dreaming communities that we're constantly trying to find ways of how to reconnect the dreams once they're through. How did you do that, Jennifer, once you'd all woken up?
Well, that's difficult for sure, but there's a few different ways. People would, early on, the Oneironauticum was actually a thing that I started for my friends. And then, early days of the web. Do you remember Stumble Upon? I don't know if you're
I
old
do.
enough. But so Stumble Upon found the Oneironauticum randomly, and also this website that was out of Mexico City called Pajama Surf, which was like at one point I started getting all of these emails and people joining who had all of these Hispanic sounding names, and I started writing to them being like, where did you hear about this anyway? Because I had hundreds of people joining. So through Pajama Surf and Stumble Upon, people just found what me and my friends were doing, and it ended up sort of spreading around. And so completely organic. And so initially just people would email in the dreams they were having, and I would post them on the site along with whatever the Oneirogen was. And then later on, when it got a little bit more advanced, we would use Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, and people would join us in the morning after we had spent the night for dream sharing to share what their dreams were or talk about it. It was all super low tech. None of this was ever any kind of, nothing fancy, really. It was just kind of me figuring out whatever worked. But that's kind of how people joined in on it. But mostly I got, and therefore, because it was so low tech and me doing it, it was never like a big, but I got a lot of emails from people talking about the experiences that they had being part of this worldwide dream community. And that was really where it came from. And it was really mostly just the experience that people were having joining in together.
When I discover something like this, I always want everybody else to get into it. They feel, but of course, it seems to be quite a small community in a way, and I sometimes wonder: is that the way it should be, or is there a chance that it's a movement? It's going to become like punk, and people will start, talking about both of you in years to come, in terms of the pioneers of the new dreaming at the beginning of a new century. What do you feel? Do you think is it for a specific group of people, or does it have a reach that can go into popular culture?
I feel like it actually, of course it's always hard to say that about one's own work, but I really do feel like it has a reach, and partly because everybody is a natural liminal dreamer. Everybody goes through hypnagogia, certainly, when you're falling asleep, and it's that hallucinatory, you're fighting to stay awake,
yes.
And you start to hallucinate, or just as you're drifting off to sleep and you hear, it's often very aural, it's very sound oriented, you hear sounds and your arm jerks or your leg jerks, you're in there. Everybody has that experience, hypnopompia, as you're waking up. Not everyone goes through that. It's dependent on your circadian rhythm. But everybody knows the experience. And the most common reaction that I have to my book is people saying to me, wow, I already knew this. I was already working with this, or I already was experiencing this. It's such an amazing experience.
That was my experience.
Yeah, it's very common. I just never knew it was a thing. I never knew it was called a thing. I never knew to stop and pay attention to it. I've known it my whole life, but it just never occurred to me that it was actually a thing. And as people become aware of the fact that it's got a name, that it's a thing that you can go into and develop, that you can get, that you can actually grow your skill at it, but you don't even have to. You can just tune into what you already do and have an amazing experience that way. I think that a lot of people really react to that. A lot of people are like, wow, I'm already having this incredible experience. And of course, it's also one of the few extraordinary states that we have that's non-commodified. It's not, there's no capitalism yet. And sometimes I worry about gentrifying, but there's no capitalism yet in this extraordinary mind state of the liminal dream. I mean, in almost everything else there is, you know, whether it's your psychedelic mind state or your REM or your lucid dream or your fantasy life, whatever it is, it's already pretty well populated in there.
Yeah.
But so few people understand hypnagogia and hypnopomnia that it actually gives you the kind of wild, wild west of consciousness.
Yes, I just want to put the same question to Kate. Do you have a feeling that is it can it become the new punk, or is it better that dreaming is sort of kept as a you know, in a community that is, you know, not going to reach out into the
I mean, you know, I guess I feel, you know, I feel like part of me feels like it already is reaching into popular culture in a massive way. You see series like the OA, which is a huge series, and the you know, the underlying thread in that is absolutely dreams and dreaming and how to surf them and how to work with them. But there's also an element of me feeling very protective about the dream states. And as you know, as Jennifer described, of it being a kind of elements of it being unmapped territory in the Wild West. I love that. And I think it's really important that it stays populated by commodification, because it's such a deep and mysterious place.
Now that's the key word, and we'll talk about that a lot more. But yeah, I mean, my reason for being so drawn to this, both of your studies and passion about dreams, is it's a communication method, and I have many feelings and thoughts about communication and social media communication. When we were talking earlier, you know, I mentioned that part of the reason for doing the Super Connected radio shows is because I've been working on a project which is exploring how people connect with each other now. We're talking about music, which is an obvious, you know, a way that people can connect. But in particular, social media was something that I'd had lots of struggles with. Most of the people I know have struggles with, in terms of how much time they spend doing it, how it affects their daily lives, mental health issues for both young and more mature people. And part of the attraction to dreaming was that it's not attached to any brands. There's no advertising involved. There's no companies trying to commoditize it. It's all inside our minds, and yet there's a beautiful way that we can connect with each other through it. Does it feel to you at all like and that there's some kind of resurgence, which ironically, a resurgence of dreams has been discovered by many people through social media, and is continuing to do so. Does it feel like a nice or a healthy alternative to all connecting as human beings in this era?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm finding is I have a lot of young people who really love these ideas. I have been invited to speak and give workshops at a lot of these events where, you know, young people have not necessarily heard a lot of these ideas, but they're trying to find ways to connect that are outside of just the social media. And so, again, dreaming is such an obvious mode because it's a thing that everybody has in common. Like, it's such a great equalizer. Everybody dreams, everybody has these experiences, everybody can connect on, and for most people, it's a really intense, personal experience that they're having going into these dream spaces. And to be able to to go to an event where we're talking about these dream spaces and to be able to say to somebody else, oh, wow, I'm having these incredible experiences that I'm going through. And then specifically with the liminal dreaming, because you have enough conscious mind aware while you're there in the dream space, that you can observe what's happening, and so you can kind of share it. And then it also kind of lends itself to technology, because in the technological mode in those realms, you're both there and not there. You're so liminal, it comes from the Latin word limen, which is where we get words like limit. It's a threshold or a doorway. It's both here and there, neither here nor there. So the space in which you're a physical body and simultaneously an ethereal body, an electronic body, while at the same time that you're located in actual space. And so in a lot of ways, these electronic spaces or social media spaces are a little bit liminal spaces. So the idea that you're having your interactions, that you're having spiritual experiences that are actually mediated by the liminal space of the electronic world, where you're sharing your ethereal bodies or whatever, isn't that far away for a lot of people. So the idea of liminal dream space actually really makes sense to these people.
Yeah, Kate?
Oh, well, it's absolutely. I think it's I was really struck when I went to a sleepover event at the Freud Museum recently, which was held by all sorts of dreamers, including Keith Hearn, who did so much research around lucid dreaming in the early days. And I was fully expecting to find, I'm mid-40s. I was fully expecting to find a room full of my aged people exploring dreams and sleepovers, and I got there and it was like, it was like going to a rave, but for dreaming. It was filled with these beautiful young people who were all here to come and sleep and dream and experience a combination of artistic interventions to help promote dreaming. So they had rooms full of oneirogens and soundscapes, but I was just struck by the young age of the people wanting to connect in that way. And something you said earlier really struck true for me, Jennifer. In terms of using social dreaming to connect with each other, what I find is that it is a real social leveler, and also a kind of anti-polarization device. Because when we connect our dreams together, there doesn't have to just be one meaning. That's what I always find so extraordinary about connecting dreams, is that you can thread them together and find that there's a kind of a multiverse of meaning that can come through them, that is the opposite of polarized thought, which I think at the moment on the planet and in the world is a really essential tool and human tool to start developing, because there seems so much polarized thought.
Yes.
I feel like dreaming is a brilliant way.
I mean, you both said that. Kate, you've talked about leveling, and Jennifer, you talked about equalizing, and also the idea that liminal it's neither one thing or the other, which is sort of the opposite to the world we're living in, which is very extreme. You mentioned, Jennifer, that there's a similarity between social media space and liminal space, but conversely, there's health authorities all over the world talking about most people's lack of sleep is to do with them looking at screens for too long. And how do you sort of approach that, where a lot of your work, and Kate, your work as well with communal dreaming, is based in social media, and you probably both have quite strong disciplines in knowing when to switch your phones off, but a lot of people don't, and you end up becoming just part of the constant connectivity that many people are using. How do you feel about that, Jennifer?
I feel like people are really happy to have ideas about how to actually take advantage of this middle space between physical and ethereal worlds, and to actually be able to linger in those spaces. So one of the things that I talk about is using something as simple as like a voice activated recorder, which is like an app that you can buy for your phone, and turning it on and then lying down into a nap, or lying down at night, and setting it and seeing if you can start to locate that space between awake and asleep, and mumble into it, and record it, and find that self that's existing between waking and sleep, that you actually can record who you're finding in that in-between space. Or with the Oneironauticum, connecting with people digitally, where we're all actually basically connecting in digital world, but through dream space, through physical bodies, where you're actually using these technologies of second self or ethereal self, but instead of having them be removed from the actual physical self, have them align with where the mind goes. In fact, so much of our lives are spent in these weird middle spaces, and young people who are spending, like, who have a lot of their friendships online, or who have a lot of this, whatever, who are tracking virtual selves through their whatever it is, their Fitbits or their sleep apps, or their, whatever, or they're on sort of social media. And, even now, people just for texts are making up these, icons of themselves that are operating for them in the digital world. That's such the
avatars.
Science fiction in the past. Yeah. So many people, it's quite normal now to have an avatar for your text messages or whatever. So I actually feel like the idea of existing in the liminal makes a lot of sense to certain, to a certain demographic. And so the idea of being between sleep and waking, or being in these middle spaces, is actually quite natural and second nature.
I love that description of it being a kind of complementary space to the dream body, and it sounds very like another space that we can hack for a really positive reason. I love that description. I find that very hopeful.
Yeah, and actually, dream hacking is often what I called it. And I've been tweeting a dream a day on Twitter for 11 years, and in the space that I've done that, I've actually started to have this weird merging of my dream life and the Twitter space, because my dream self knows that this experience that I'm having in the dream world is going to be condensed into a set number of characters, in the morning. And so it's almost like the dream space, starts to recommend the, how am I going to describe this dream in the, it gets very meta with the dream space and the technology.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I was going to talk about your one dream a day, which you've been doing, I know, for 11 years. This is like me playing what I call devil's avocado. It's a healthier version of the devil's advocate. For people who, I have a friend, I won't mention his name, he's very, very well known, public figure who I'd asked about social dreaming, and he was horrified and was saying, people shouldn't talk about their dreams, and it's in this world of connectivity where there's so little privacy, and we know everything about each other. At least there should be one part of our lives that's kept sacred, for goodness sake. Social dreaming, whatever next. And you're sharing a dream, and I think some people listening will probably feel the same. They'll be intrigued and curious to hear all of us talking about this, but on the other hand, they'll be like, yeah, not for me, love, you know. So yeah, I'll ask Kate the same question as well, but what's your feeling about that? I mean, sure, everybody has their own choice they can make with this sort of thing, but for you post one of your deepest, most private night thoughts every day. You have done for 11 years.
It's just like telling a story about what happened during my day. I mean, I don't mind telling you that some of the stuff I dream about, I would not put on Twitter.
Okay,
it's still a choice.
So there's a rating then to Jennifer's dreams on Twitter.
I mean, I remember on an average 3 dreams a night. So, and there's often, I mean, and also, you know, my dreams, you know, can often be pretty long. And so, you know, what my, you know, tweeting a dream a day is, you know, really involves grabbing some specific image or through line or part of the narrative of a dream. Yeah. You know, I mean, if I was posting my actual dream journal, that, I mean, who is it? Oscar Wilde, who says that you should, who is it? You should never talk about your dreams or the weather. You know, I mean, telling the whole story of what my dreams were all night would take rather longer than what I can do in a tweet. Yeah. But I can grab some of, and I do try to grab like the essence of a dream. You know, sometimes I'm mushing together two different dreams. And you know, and it's great. It serves as a dream journal for me too. I mean, I can go back and, you know, for me, I can just read that bit and remember the whole dream. Sure.
I mean, I've been dream journaling for the first time in my life for about 9 months now. I'm nowhere near a stage of being able to share those online in a way that can be recorded, repeated, shared, copy and pasted, and all the rest of it. I'm nowhere near that. Kate, what's your feeling? I mean, we've done social dreaming matrices together, which is contained, I guess, and you know that, Jennifer. You know, in a social dreaming matrix, it's contained. Nobody's taking anything. It's kind of like you've signed an NDA form beforehand, and you know that anything you say is sort of protected in the space. What do you feel about that, Kate?
About
people who are just sort of, I can't tell you my dreams, they're mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think people share different aspects of themselves, and people are able to share different aspects of themselves. So I think possibly people who, particularly people who are in the public eye anyway, making their own art in different ways, don't maybe need to share dreams in that way. But I find the sharing of dreams an incredibly creative process, and it's a way of people accessing a space and working with an element of their creativity and their imagination in whatever the dream life is delivering to them in a really beautiful way. So I think it's an amazing tool for sharing an inner world. Certainly, you know, for me, I'm if I could get into a practice like Jennifer and share something every day, you know, that is practice. And that's one of the things that really inspired me. One of the elements of your book, Jennifer, when you talk about practice, you know, and the dedication needed to be sharing a dream every day is extraordinary. I've started in my very own small way to try and do a collage a day, a dream collage a day. And again, you know, not the entire dream, but just pulling through a few threads and images from a dream and maybe smushing a couple together and creating an image palette from the dream space. I've certainly, you know, I'm not as dedicated as Jennifer yet, but that's something I would aspire to. And in terms of people sharing dreams, you know, there's that old saying that there's nothing more boring than listening to other people's dreams, that people often kind of wheel out as a sentence around dreaming. But I think it's absolutely the opposite. I love hearing people about people's dreams. I find them so beautiful and tender, and people are so happy to share them when they know it's okay to speak them. You know, I think they're.
That's so my experience too. I mean, often when I'm speaking I speak at festivals and conferences, and then I usually insist on speaking on one of the early nights, and then for the subsequent nights, people come up and tell me all their amazing dream experiences, which I know most people find dull, but I love.
I love it.
Everything has all of the layers of meaning that have been laid over it from then until now. It's like the idea of psychogeography, which is that any space in which you move gets layered with all of the meanings and all of the experiences and everything that happens in that space. And, one of the things that's most amazing about whatever, a track, music or a scent or a place or whatever, is all of the layers of meaning that get added onto it over time. Whatever, it's like the lines on your face, it's just, it all becomes a deeply rich and layered map of experience.
So it's like the earth. It's a kind of nature. It's constantly evolving and growing and absorbing new information.
It reminds me of dream work, of long form dream working, where you can get the first layer of meaning from a dream when you first wake up and write it down. But if you work with a dream for a long time, which sometimes I do, there's a couple of dreams I've been working with actively, artistically, for maybe 5 or 6 years. The layers of meaning that come out of the dream become huge as you start to look at them from different angles and different facets of the dream, and look at the different symbology in the dream. So it really, music and dreamings are very good allies in that way, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, I couldn't agree with that more. And the idea that you're using the same dreams are coming in and out of your life over and over again. I mean, I have dreams that I had, really literally decades ago, where I sometimes go back in and move through the same spaces, either literally in a dream that I'm having or imaginatively in the way that I'm going through the dream. And not even in terms of interpretation, just phenomenologically, just in terms of what the experience of the dream is. And I start to understand different things about myself and the place, just like the memory of anything else.
Kate, what's your special connection in your life, something that's followed you about, or you've followed it?
Well, I was trying to decide which one to choose, actually, because obviously there's always so many, but actually a dream that I had last night kind of pointed the way of what I would choose, and especially Jennifer talking about maps. And I would say the thing that's been connecting to me for some time now is a place called Damanhur, which is an eco-spiritual community in Italy, which is a kind of series of temples that are built into the side of an Italian mountain. Beautiful, the temples of humankind. And the way they've been connecting to me is I've been dreaming of this very specific place over and over again. I didn't know where it was, but I was beginning to map the territory and returning to this very, very specific place over and over again for years and years and years. And then I finally had one incredibly specific dream, and then started to discover it was actually a real place, and the real place was Damanhur. And so we followed this dream, a massive group of us. Last year, 69 of us followed the dream and went to connect with the people of Damanhur, and who are huge dreamers themselves. So I would say, yeah, Damanhur.
Jennifer, what's your special connection?
Well, I had a hard time narrowing it down as well, but I chose the image of the spiral because I was studying myth in my 20s as an undergraduate, and then I finished that and set off traveling around the world for 3 years, and just kind of free range. And the image of the spiral just kept coming up over and over again. Ancient peoples marked their solstice and equinox, places with spirals, and a lot of religious visionaries came up with spirals, and through nature and mathematics, the Fibonacci series and the golden mean, things often grow in a spiral kind of equation, in a spiral, way proportionately as they're expanding in their sort of natural growth patterns. Dust devils in the desert, and dirt devils in the city, and just the idea of the spiral as, what is both marking the cyclicity of time, the repetition, and yet the forward motion of time, of the idea that, how energy arises and is maintained in the world, and something about the idea of the spiral and how life is and how it moves forward seems really resonant to me. And there's still a real mystery there for me. And so it's often what propels me into like the big question.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, Jennifer, Kate, to our listeners about dreams?
Write them down. Keep your pen by your side.
Yeah.
There's treasure to be had, and share it. Yeah.
Yeah, Jennifer?
I would echo that. And whether or not you're writing it down, talk to somebody else about it, talk into a voice active recorder. Whatever it is you pay attention to in your life is whatever will flower. Attention is the energy that brings forth, a blessing in your life. So if you're interested in your own unconscious, if you're interested in seeing those ideas, pay attention to it. Even just think about the dreams, and it will flower.
Thank you, Kate Alderton, and all the way from San Francisco, Jennifer Dimpert. Thank you for being my guest on Super Connected. And cut.
Yeah, all right.